Hi, this is Eric L. Dunavant, the Mindset Disruption Strategist. Thank you so much for joining me today for Redefining Success, the Kingdom Builder Spotlight. We have a special time today. I've got such a special guest joining me today, Robert White. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's CEO of Extraordinary People, he's a mentor to executive teams and executives. But more than that, I got the chance to ask Robert to be on the podcast. We had an opportunity to do an event together. I guess it was almost a year ago, Robert. We were up in Utah doing an event that we will talk a little bit more about called Living a Better Story. And Robert was the speaker the first day. And wow, that's all I can say is wow. I mean, just a man who understands how to help you really kind of start to frame a vision for the future and kind of understand maybe some in a short period of time, right? What are some of your limiting factors? What are some things that are staying in your way? And then how do you begin to kind of break those down? And so I know we're going to get into a lot of that. I'm looking forward to talking about just the impact, Robert, you've made on the world. I mean, you talk about a man, this man has not just made a difference in the lives of people here, like in the US, he's made a difference globally. And so the stories that you've got to tell and just the way that you've helped people redefine success and look from things from a different perspective maybe they had before is going to make just a great story today. So Robert, thank you so much for being with us.
That's a great pleasure. I was getting nervous that my introduction would be longer than my talk, but look, I'm blessed, and part of it's just age and gray hair, but I'm blessed to receive some really nice introductions recently. And one of the things I like to remind myself and anybody that I'm communicating with is that the most special thing about me, Eric, is I'm a very average person. You know, I'm not very disciplined in some areas. I struggle with my weight. I've been very good at getting married. I'm not very good at staying married. You know, so I'm really average. I think, though, that I am an example of what can happen when you start living by more positive and life-affirming principles. When you start paying attention to spirit and spiritual development, when you start paying attention just to life as it shows up and really tell the truth about it and deal with it as it is, not some story or fantasy that you've made up. So yeah. I am an example of growth because God knows I needed it, you know. So. And that's somewhat what I share with executives. I've discovered that these incredibly talented, successful people that just are so good at accomplishment often have that same pattern in their lives, like me, feeling, anything negative, anything, a betrayal, anything like that happens, because they're ambitious, they do just what I did, which is you stuff it down, because you're focused and you're aligned and you're going for it. And I can't deal with that feeling right now, so I'm just going to ignore it. And so many of my clients are so much like me, and that's useful because I can kind of understand their journey because of my own.
I don't want to get too far off on this because I want to talk about you, but I mean, I think what I would agree is, as a successful executive and as someone who kind of lives in that life, is the word that's used in the industry kind of imposter syndrome. It's like, are they going to find out that I really don't know that much about what I'm doing?
I can tell you so many imposter stories that it's just staggering. One of my clients was a very successful young guy, a fast track, big corporate guy. And he was called into the CEO's office, which was a big deal. He did not report to the CEO, and told that he would be the youngest vice president in the history of the firm. And he went home and he was discovered by his wife, curled up in a fetal position in his bedroom, crying, sobbing. And it was that thing. He thought, now I'm going to be found out. I've been given this big job, but I've been faking it all this time, and now I'm going to be found out. He did get some help. He got a coach, a mentor that helped him to see that he really deserved that promotion. Yeah. He really was a fast track, very talented guy. everybody could see it except him.
Mm.
But some things had happened in his growing up years, just very similar to mine. And the way he interpreted it was, I'm going to put on this face, this image of a successful guy, but it's all fake as long as they don't find out,
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is more familiar than you might think.
Well, and I think that's the one thing. The name of the podcast is Redefining Success. I think what the world tries to tell us is success is like the straight up path, right? And it doesn't come with bumps, and the other thing that I found to be true is so many times is the only way to go to the next level up is to fall down a level, right?
Yep.
You got to go backwards in order to go forwards, because it's the lessons you learn in the falling backwards that then equip you to be able to go to the next place that you're going to go. But what the rest of the world, you come back to, you said this at the very beginning, the stories, the lies, the things that we hold on to, either from our childhood or even from other traumatic or other experiences, but come in to this idea of, that's not just because that's the way the movie played it out, or that's the way you saw it, or you think it goes, doesn't mean that's the way it goes. That's such an important thing.
As you have experienced in our 3 days together, one of my exercises is to ask people to identify turning points, significant events in their life, and then to look for patterns, positive patterns or patterns that are not so positive. And, for me, one of them was that I semi-retired, almost retired at 46. I had built this very large, the second largest training company in the world. We had 240 people, 70 full-time trainers, operating in 7 countries with 15 offices, a big operation and very profitable. And I kind of quit. I was living in Asia. I moved to Aspen, Colorado. I built a 14,500 square foot home, bought a jet, did all the nouveau riche things. 6 nonprofit boards. I traveled with the late John Denver for 6 months. I did a lot of really interesting things. I met 3 presidents. I've met 2 kings. I've met an emperor. I've had all these wonderful things happen. And I started, and then we had 2 birth children and 2 adopted special needs kids. So my retirement was kind of busy. Yeah. And I skied 80 days a year.
Wow.
So life was very, very good for Robert. But I started waking up in the morning, and I thought of this when I was thinking about this conversation with you, that I would share this. I started waking up with this nagging thought that I just tried to get it out of my mind. But almost every morning I'd wake up thinking, God has something in mind for me and I haven't done it yet. And in our work, because it's high impact experiential learning, the group work, we have avoided any kind of, even a hint of religion, because we don't want to get in the target zone with some fundamentalist Muslim, fundamentalist Christian, fundamentalist Jew takes us on.
Sure.
So I had spent years really carefully avoiding that on a professional level and coaching my people to do the same. And people would come and they would ask us about that. Well, I had this spiritual experience in your training, which is true.
Right, absolutely.
But I don't want to claim that. Because if I go off in that direction, I become in the target zone of some very committed people.
Yeah.
And yet here I am, very much experiencing the presence of God almost every morning.
Yeah.
Or I'm out on the ski hill and I stop and just enjoy the view. One of the things I love to do. Yeah. And suddenly God is there speaking to me, kind of saying, what's next? And then, traveling with John Denver, he would do a concert one night, and then the next night we would do this environmental education program called Higher Ground. Mm-hmm. It's basically the teachings of the late Buckminster Fuller. But when John would get off the stage, like it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, it's like morning for him. He's excited out of his mind. I just want to go to bed. But we had a lot of long talks. And one of those talks, it's one of those things you do remember, when a good friend looks you in the eye and says, God isn't finished with you. But being a guy, of course, he's got to include an insult, right? So he said, you think you're a big deal, but your real future is ahead of you. I wonder what it's going to be like. And he would tease me like that. And it was true. All of that was going on for me. And again, one of the things I've discovered, and that so attracted me to you, quite frankly, is that you ain't just another financial advisor. I know that's not one of your mottos in your advertising material, but it could be.
Right.
But the idea that no matter what your job is, yours or mine, or maybe one of our listeners, there's a bigger aspect to it. There's a bigger contribution possible. So I've been trying to keep that in mind for myself as I'm working with executives, but I haven't found one yet that didn't have a secret yearning for how they wanted to matter, how they wanted to leave a legacy, how they want, how they wanted the best for the world. And they might not, they might be moving dirt, excavation guy. One of my clients does concrete forms, and there isn't anything much more basic than that. But this guy and his wife they're committed to leaving something behind of value. And I'm so inspired by people like that, and I'm trying to live into it myself.
Well, and what I've found, people like you, and then interviewing other people like we're having on the show, is this entire idea that what I've really found is the world, and you've done this a lot longer. I don't know how much this has changed. I'm going off of, my almost 50 years of living. So maybe it was different at another point. I don't imagine it was too different, but likes to think that success has something to do with dollars in a bank account. And likes to think that the more dollars you have in a bank account means less problems, and both of those things then become problems, right? So success means how much money I have, so I've got to go pursue the money, and then when I have the money, I'm supposed to have less problems. And it's like, no, it's exactly the opposite. The money isn't the success, and the more money you have, the more problems you invite. One of my favorite phrases is money doesn't cause problems. It just reveals and magnifies all those things you've been ignoring. And one of the things I loved about what you do, Robert, and I want to explore this a little bit more, I want to back time up a little bit and talk a little bit about how did you get into this and how did you find this? But what fascinated me more than anything is you really seem to understand this and really helped a lot of people. I was looking at your, extraordinary people. That's your website. That's kind of your mission and what I got out of that is, how do I find the extraordinary in myself? Because every single person is full of self-doubt. Every single person, even, the greatest presidents have woken up probably in the middle of the night. Like, am I the guy I go back to imposter syndrome? Am I the guy to do this? Can I really pull this off? And every single successful person struggles with that. And yet you plugged into and understood, I think very early on, a way to help people find their own light and find their own extraordinary. So tell me a little bit about the journey. How did you even kind of get into this? How did you discover that this was something that you were called to do?
I certainly didn't suddenly get the wisdom, it's hard earned. I think, I talked about significant life events, when I was, I grew up in a household with a couple of dysfunctional parents, alcoholic father and a very angry and violent mother. And so I wanted to get out. That was, and you talk about some noble life purpose. I just wanted to get out of that house. And number two, I didn't want to be poor again. That kind of thing. Yeah. When I was 12 years old, I wrote an essay in class at school that won a contest. I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin. At that time, only 50,000 people. So when I say I won the contest for the city, I'm not talking about millions of people that I was competing with, but part of the prize was a new bicycle, pretty cool. And a Schwinn with all the bells and whistles.
That's a big deal.
But the other prize was to go. I didn't at first experience it as a prize, and that was to go to a radio station and read a small portion of my essay on the air. And I walked into this radio station and I fell in love.
Wow.
I just fell in love. All those lights and all those pieces of equipment. And here's a guy sitting in front of a microphone and communicating with thousands of people and having obvious fun.
Right.
And I just fell in love with it. And then I went home and I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I went back to that radio station and I said, I want to hang around. I want to watch you do what you do. And they said, no, insurance problems and, all that. Yeah. And I'm 12 years old. And as I'm leaving, the secretary said, kind of the whisper, the psst, thank goodness or thank God. And she said, look, I overheard what you want to do. Our competitor down the street, WDUZ, has a hallway and they have all glass walls and they have speakers so you can hear what's being broadcast, but you can see how they're doing it. And it's open. It's a foyer.
Yeah.
So for 2 years, I did that every Saturday.
Did you really?
Yeah. I might have missed a few, but not many. Yeah. And I just fell in love. And then 14 years old, I'm sitting in school and somebody comes from the principal's office and says, come see the principal. And he sits down with me and he says, what have you been doing at that radio station? That's my little secret. And the radio station had fired all of their control engineers in a labor dispute, probably illegally today. Yeah. And they needed somebody that knew how to, they call it running the board. The announcer announces, yeah, but who's putting the tapes on and playing the records and all that stuff. So at 14, I started as a control engineer, got licensed by the FCC, did all that stuff. By 17, I had the highest rated radio show in the state of Wisconsin. Wow. I made more money that year than my father ever made. And wow. So that was a turning point for me in terms of confidence. And then because I'm on the radio all the time, and of course, my classmates are the primary audience, it's a top 40 show. Yeah. And I'm doing all of these, they call it record hops, these personal appearances, DJ appearances. I got named most likely to succeed. Okay. Now there's two things about that. One is I graduated 6th out of 300, not bad. Yeah. I called my mother. I told her that. And she said, why weren't you number 1? Oh. Now I don't have to tell the rest of that story, right? No. In terms of programming. But the second thing that happened was that I spent the next 10 years making them wrong. Yeah. So at 26 or 27, I was broke. I was divorced already and felt very guilty about it. I had a fairly severe heart ailment. I'd been told I would die by 35 and it's inoperable. Wow. And salaries weren't paid in my little sales company. And I just was a mess. And a friend of mine in a similar business went out to California and went through one of the early human potential movement trainings, a company called Biodynamics or MDI. And he came back and he said, you have to go. And of course I said no. And even, my life was a mess, but I'm certainly not going to go to one of these California seminars. And, but then something happened over the next 6 months. First of all, his business did that, and mine was like that. Secondly, he was easier to be around. I couldn't identify exactly what it was. Yeah. Because, it's Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You get together for a beer. And once a month or so, we'd get together for a beer. And he was just different. But the other thing was, he had something I didn't even know existed: adult onset acne. Oh. Now, if you're a teenager, you get acne and it goes away. It's a temporary emergency. what the girls are going to think of you. Right. If you get it as an adult, it stays. And so all the time that I had known him, 3 or 4 years, he did all these different treatments, cortisone and scrubs and I remember one time his entire face looked like that, those monkeys that have the red butts,
Yeah.
you know, and he's in a sales business, and he was very sensitive about it. It went away.
Really?
Yeah, and he said it was because of the seminar, which I didn't believe, but I noticed it.
Yeah, right.
So I went to the seminar, and for 3 of the 4 days, I sat there with my arms crossed and probably my eyes crossed and cynical and negative and all that. And I can't explain it. I guess I could talk about it kind of, but on the 4th day, my whole life changed. I went out and I did. There wasn't a word in the seminar about money, not a word. But I tripled my income that year. And the next year, it went up by 10 times. And so that led me into eventually becoming president of Mind Dynamics and running the business side of that business. But so the first 2 years kind of straightening out their US business, and we were already they were highly successful when I joined them, but they were a mess. You can be very successful and be a mess. So I had something to do. And the second 2 years there, I opened 5 foreign subsidiaries. I got to travel around the world.
Wow.
Which was just an incredible experience for me, and incredible amount of learning. The ownership of that company changed and made it impossible for me to be there. So I launched a company called Lifespring that went on to have 500,000 graduates in the United States, and went to Japan, and that became the largest training company in Asia and the second largest in the world. And then, so that's kind of my history. Yeah. But in that last 2 years at Mind Dynamics, the founder persuaded me to go through the instructor training. Giant wake-up call, number 2, where I started seeing that whether you say it's a blessing or God's gift or an accident or whatever it was, that I had some ability in seeing where people were in reality, not the story they told me, but where they really were. Yeah. And well, you probably saw a little of that at Powder Mountain. Yeah, I did. Right. So that's something that I'm reasonably good at, and it's valuable when you're working with the size of the egos of my clients.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I found to be true, I mean, usually, you can tell me usually it begins to manifest itself in some sort of like, I'm stuck from a business standpoint, or I'm stuck financially, or I'm trying to get this breakthrough. Like, you can feel this breakthrough, and we always seem to try to want to compartmentalize it of, I need to solve a business problem. I need to solve something inside of my business. Right. But 99% of the time, actually, I'm probably going to say 100% of the time, it's not a business problem that you actually need to solve. Your breakthrough is sitting somewhere, and I like to break it into like 3 other. It's sitting inside of a family issue. It's sitting inside of some connection to God, faith issue, or you've got a fitness issue. You get something going on with your health. And if you could figure one of those things out, that's where the breakthrough happens on the business side of things. Is that accurate from what you've seen?
That's one way of saying it, and it is accurate. Look, there's a drawing in my book. I put it in my book. We use it in our seminars, and it's the picture of the iceberg. Yeah. 10% of the iceberg is showing, 90% does not show. But what sunk the Titanic? It wasn't the water. It wasn't the part you could see. Yeah. And we all have a huge amount of subconscious beliefs, and they run us. If you're in the supermarket one day and you see a harried mom dealing with 3 kids, and one of them is, the kids don't want to be there, of course, and it's no fun, but she's not going to get a babysitter, so she can go to the market, right? So one of them's on the floor screaming and yelling. She finally loses it. She grabs him by the arm and gives him a swat on the butt. How do you react? If you ask 100 people that, you get 100 different answers. That's right. But there are some patterns, but you don't stop and think about it. Your subconscious
Mm.
So so some people say, well, I get away from the upset as quickly as I can. Some people say I intervene. I start coaching a woman. By the way, unless you're trained, that doesn't ever turn out well.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine.
Right. Or you get down on the floor and help pick up the stuff the kid knocked off the shelf. There's all these different responses. None of them are right or wrong. Some of them work better than others, but that reaction comes from your subconscious. You don't stop and think about it. You act, you do something.
That's right. Yeah.
Same when some guy walks in your office and says, I've got this problem at home. And you're thinking, well, this is the office, so I don't want to talk to you, or you jump into it and now you become part of the drama. Right. Or you refer them to HR, or whatever you do.
Yeah.
If you can be aware of that, if you can bring that up in your awareness of what's driving you, but you can only do that if you've done the work of finding out what drives you. And so that's a bit of the work that I do with people. But getting things from the subconscious into the conscious, because then you can choose and you can make better choices.
Yeah.
That experience that I had of waking up in total luxury with everything I ever dreamed of in my life, and having God speak to me and tell me that, hey, you ain't done yet, buddy. He was a little more elegant than that, but what that required was I had to put aside some of that patterning that I had, that all of this success was an accident, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked hard.
Sure.
I'm reasonably intelligent. I genuinely like people. They tend to like me. That's good. And I kind of knew that. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in Powder Mountain, but my book, Living an Extraordinary Life, it's now a bestseller. People like it, and I'm pleased about that. I think it's helped some people make better choices. But I was really nervous. I mean, people told me to write that book for 20 years, and I stalled, and I had excuses. They were good ones too. But I finally got shamed by the success of 7 Habits book. Which is about 50% of our material.
Is that? Oh, sorry.
And so people were right. I should have written a book. And so I finally wrote it, but I was so nervous. And then people liked it, and people like Ken Blanchard and Jimmy Colano and all these famous people like it and buy lots of copies for their friends. Great. And for about 18 seconds, I felt okay. Because what happens next is people would say, I love your book, but I was disappointed. So I go, about what? And they'd say, well, the book is not about you, Robert. The book is about your graduates and how they interact with your material and so on, which is true. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in Powder Mountain, but one chapter is about me. But it doesn't admit that in the book. But that chapter is titled, You Are Not Enough. You are not enough, which is the basis, if you think about it, of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And so my journey personally, and in the people I work with, is about being enough. That, Arjun Sin, who you've met, Arjun talks about you're one of one. I've been teaching, using different words. I've been teaching that, but I like his expression, so I'm stealing it. But we're all one of one.
Yeah,
we're all a manifestation of God's grace, and with all of our mistakes, with all of our frailties, with all of our sins, with all of the screw ups, we're still special.
Yeah,
we're unique. We are one of one, and if we can own that. And be conscious about all that other stuff, we're going to be better at hiring. We're going to be better at firing. We're going to be better at managing, better at leading, better with our families, better in our communities. So that's what I'm up to.
That's awesome. Robert, let me ask you this question. If you kind of you look at where you are today and the things that you're doing with Living a Better Story and the retreats that are happening there where we met in Powder Mountain. And then you're looking at just kind of the things that are ahead, and that experience of waking up of like, you've been called to more. There's always kind of a cautious question, but I think it's important is, are there things that you would go back and change if you could? Are there things that you would do differently that you'd tell the young man who or the man who had the success, the man who sold the business and retired, what'd you say, 46?
Yes.
That you would tell that guy, maybe even at 36 or whatever. What does that look like for you?
Wow. Well, a commitment that I made actually with John Denver in one of those late night sessions is to live a life of no regrets.
Yeah.
Now, do I have them from the past? Yes and no, because I do a lot of work with people around realizing that at any given moment, it's all a choice.
Yeah.
So it's that thing that you're judging yourself for. I mean, one word on it is spiritual, to realize that God's grace means acceptance by God of you, no matter how you screwed up.
That's right.
All right. But there's a more practical way of doing it, the non-spiritual way, the behavioral way, is to realize that at that point in time, that person that you wronged or you betrayed, that divorce that you had a hand in, that kid that you maybe weren't as good a parent as you should have been or wanted to be.
Yep.
In that moment, you actually made the best choice you could make. Given who you were being, given the information you had at that time, given the knowledge, the wisdom, the maturity, or lack of it, whatever, you made the best decision then.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point.
To beat yourself up after that is just the most incredibly useless, stupid thing to do. And it gets in the way of you owning your own power, of taking full responsibility for your life and making good choices going into the future. For most of us, when we make that kind of mistake, we learn from it. We pay a price.
Yep.
We don't do it again. If we're doing it again, you better call me.
That's right.
Because there's a deeper pattern going on there, and we can find out what that pattern is, and then do a pattern interrupt. And we're all capable of that. I think the biggest thing that I would tell the 30-year-old Robert or something, some story like that, is wake up, first of all. Develop a higher state of noticing, because the universe gives you all kinds of feedback.
Yeah.
Most of the time we're not listening.
That's right.
The second piece is really get that personal responsibility, owning it all really works. And then finally get into a higher level of communication, a mastery level of listening, of speaking, of writing, of sensing and feeling. I've shared with people a couple of times that you don't need my coaching or training if you develop a really high level of noticing. You become your own trainer, your own therapist, your own doctor, your own trainer or teacher, whatever. Because we are designed by God for perfection. And we fall, the stories, we fall away from it.
Yeah.
But we'll go back to it if we just wake up.
Yeah.
I'm not a preacher. I'm not even a teacher, but I can ask some pretty good questions to help people see that the answers to their life are within them. The answers are unique to them because they are unique.
Yeah.
And they have this.
That's so powerful, because that's something that it took a few years and some coaching and some training that I was blessed to receive to really kind of understand that the ultimate gift is when you can learn to be your own therapist.
Yes.
When you can learn to be your best counsel.
Just to notice those patterns that we fall into, including the ones that really work for us, and celebrating those and doing more of them. Do more. Classic advice, right? Do more of what works. Do less of what doesn't work.
You may have just answered it in everything that you did, but I'm going to kick myself if I don't ask this question and there's a different answer, because I think about the people who are listening right now, people who, they're listening to something called Redefining Success. So they want to know different ways that they're doing. Is there any pattern or anything that you see that we haven't talked about that's like, man, if I can just tell everyone this one thing, it would really begin to shift things for them? Because this is, when I walk into a room, this is where most people are stuck.
A guy that has done a very good job of promoting himself and selling a book is Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
On his book about why.
Yep.
I don't use that expression. In neurolinguistic programming, you learn to never ask why, because it triggers the brain, not the heart. But it's a very good book. And the idea is that we get in touch with our purpose for living, not our vision, not our goals, but why am I here? Why is this unique individual here on the planet? And in my work, I've identified 4 levels of purpose. And the first one, the most obvious, is survival. You got to handle food, clothing, and shelter. Yeah. All right. The second level is maintenance, and that is getting your food, clothing, and shelter handled so you don't have to worry about it. Right. Just a routine in your life, so you're not broke or you're not struggling, you're not an alcoholic. You're maintaining life. The third level is the one that a lot of business people I've noticed avoid, and that's leisure. And by leisure, I do not mean laying on the beach. I mean, it's turning all of your life into a work of play. That everything you're doing brings a smile to you, that you love what you're doing. And yes, it does include some time on the beach. It includes, I found myself, unfortunately, after a divorce, sitting on the floor putting nylons on Barbie dolls. Do you know what it's like for a mature man to, or a supposedly mature man, to be putting nylons on Barbie dolls? You can have fun doing that.
Yeah.
You can have fun in lots of ways, and it is a higher level of purpose than survival or maintenance. But the highest level of all is contribution. And I know that's where you come from in your work with wealthy families. And I love that about you. And I love that whole mission that you've got going. And that is to think, sure, you want to increase your wealth, but you also want to increase its impact.
That's right.
On your family, on the community, on the world. Yeah. And the fact that you're helping people plan that, first of all, I fell in love with you because you're a Christian that doesn't depend on church. So I figure I found another member of my tribe.
There you go.
But this whole notion of having a routine, your routine about in the morning, right? Yeah. All of those things that resonates with me. But toward what end? Well, for me, it's toward contribution.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm donating somewhere between 10 and 20 and probably more to Living a Better Story. I'm not getting paid, but I'm helping to build this tribe of Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Muslims who maybe don't go to church or synagogue or temple or mosque, but they're deeply connected to God, and they are here to contribute, to fulfill God's purpose for them in the real world.
Yep.
And I love that. I love contributing to it. I love helping people get other stuff out of the way so that they can win at all 4 of those levels of purpose.
So you've talked about that a little bit. Let's wait, Robert, you and I could talk for another hour. I'm gonna have to be respectful of my audience. We're gonna have to keep this to 45 minutes, but I want to kind of end this here, which is, we've talked a little bit about where we met and Living a Better Story. And there's people going like, what is this Living a Better Story? What is this thing? So a couple of things I want you to highlight. One, this is early February. I know there is an event in February I want you to mention, but if you know of other events, I don't know exactly when this will go live. So I don't want to miss that window if there's other windows that are ahead. But who's the right person that needs to look into this? Tell them a little bit about the experience and what it is. Guys, I will just tell you, I had the honor of getting to speak at one. And so that was incredible. Robert and I were both speaking, but the participation too. But give the audience an idea of what is the event about, what's it for, who should attend, and again, the dates of what's coming up of what you know, and then in the future where they can also find future dates.
Look, the one I don't actually I should look here. I do have a computer, right? The one that's coming up in February will be here in Colorado.
Okay.
And it's the 17th through the 20th. So it's a 4-day program. It's residential. You live in, and get to know some really wonderful people. And what we're looking for people is people that already have a good story. I mean, we're already doing kind of okay in the world. It's about what's next, about what's possible for you, if with a little bit of fine tuning, and also the support of the kind of people this kind of thing attracts. I mean, you saw at Powder Mountain, what an incredible group of people.
Wow, was
it right?
Yeah.
And the one we did in Scottsdale was again the same. It was different, but it was the same in terms of connection to really wonderful, wonderful, powerful people who will be my friends the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And so we want to do more of these things. I don't know when the next one is scheduled, but certainly within 90 days after this one in February. But we want to get to the point where it's every month and we're reaching thousands of people. So that's what we're up to, serving people whose story is already pretty good, but they want to live a better story.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Actually, livingabetterstory.com is where you can go. There's videos, there's information. You're going to find out when the next event is. I highly recommend that you go spend some time. Robert will probably be there. Chad will be there. Arjun maybe even be there. I don't know who all is speaking lately. It all depends, but there are some incredible people that you would get to spend some time with. And
it's also cheaper than my work.
You go,
frankly.
I love that.
Everybody's working free,
Yep.
So
one last little thing is always a question I like to ask. A book other than the Bible, and I'm going to even limit you from yours, that you would recommend people read that would really make a difference in their lives.
It's if I have to choose just one, it's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's story of his survival in the Holocaust. He's one of those guys with a number on his arm. And it's the closest thing to the Bible. I was on the radio once and when I was doing the PR for my book, and you send the book ahead and somebody reads it, usually not the interviewer, and they come up with 5 questions, and one of them has to be snarky. That's like a rule. Yeah. And so this guy says, well, what's so special about your book? I mean, there's all these books on personal development. And he said, aren't they all derivative? And I don't know, I was tired or I was distracted or I was just being incredibly honest. And I said, well, they are all derivative. There's only 2 originals, the Holy Bible, and I said, Think and Grow Rich, which is an old, kind of badly written, but very good book. Yeah. And since then, I do recommend Man's Search for Meaning, but Think and Grow Rich is pretty good about success. So, and as I'm saying, I can see these words in the air, going into the microphone, and I'm thinking, I've just told people not to buy my book. But I think I have a pretty good book, and a lot of people seem to like it. But Man's Search for Meaning is the one to read and reread.
Wonderful. Robert, if anybody's listening to the show and they're like, I've got to get in touch with this guy, I've got to know more, I've got to just be, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, find out more about you, and learn more just kind of about the work that you're doing?
Look, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that stuff, but the best way is to email me, okay. Robert@extraordinarypeople.com.
Okay.
And also, if you go on the website, extraordinarypeople.com, one of the things I'm happy to offer people with no charge is over the years, I've written a 28-page essay on success and about what we call our 8 principles. And a lot of people have found it to be valuable. It's free, and also it signs you up for my weekly e-zine, which is called An Extraordinary Minute.
Oh, that's fantastic. Actually, I'm on the website right now. If you go there, I mean, it's super easy. It's right there. It's in a purple box right in front of you. You can't miss it. So go sign up for that. Get the 28-page success guide with the 8 principles. Robert, what an honor. What a joy. I think we're going to probably end up trying to find a way to do this again, because I had so many things we didn't even get into and the time went like that. So thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for honoring me by being here today.
You're very welcome. And look, it's all about relationship, with listeners. I don't know if we'll ever do anything together, but I want to meet people. I learn from them. Hopefully they can learn something from me. We can rock and roll together.
I love that. I love that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. And we'll be here again next week. Have a great week. God bless you.